Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Preview. And if you haven't listened to any of our podcasting content this week, you might be saying, Jeff, you've lost your mind again. The Steelers are not playing. They're done. And, this was something that I spoke with Bryan, my co-host, about this yesterday via telephone. I said, I definitely want to do a show still. I'm not sure how we want to do this. He said simply, let's just keep it the preview, man. Let's just keep doing what we've been doing, but we're going to start previewing the offseason. And that's something I think we can all get behind. I can't promise no Antonio Brown talk. Okay, I'd love to be able to come on here and say, look, we're not going to talk about it. It's big news, and it can shape the team needs in the offseason, which is going to be the main talking point that we have in this episode. So we are going to talk about it. It's going to be relative to how we're framing this whole spiel that we're going to call a podcast. And with that said, I bring in Bryan Davis, my co-host and friend. How's it going, Bryan?
I am the masked podcaster. I was actually watching that last night. For some reason, my wife wanted to watch the show. I watched it, and they're trying to guess who it is. I'm like, that's Antonio Brown. I figured it out just because he was singing Bobby Brown, and he was talking about how dancing gets him in trouble. And he was cocky, even in a rhino mask. So I figured I would follow the lead, but I gave myself up way too quick.
Well, then the song that he chose, it's my prerogative. I mean, talk about fitting. I mean, my goodness. I was like, geez, he picked this song on this day. I wonder when that was taped, because that wasn't live, was it?
Middle of June.
Okay, so that had been it
was 6 months ago.
Okay, I did not know that. I'm thinking it was maybe that's why he skipped practice.
So a lot of people
singing hippo.
And a lot of people were complaining about that on sports radio, and like, no, you really can't. You can't throw that one at him. You can throw a lot of stuff that's going to stick, but that one's not going to work. That's just his ego.
Okay, so let's get this shindig on the road, and I think we're going to start off with number 84. And if you want to hear nothing but Antonio Brown talk, please go back to our last two episodes. You can check out my solo show, which was really short, only 11 minutes, I think. And that was where I talked about what should the Steelers do with Antonio Brown. Last night, Lance and I were on the Standard is the Standard, and we talked predominantly about Antonio Brown. I thought that was a very good episode, so make sure you check that out. But I want to get Bryan's take on Antonio Brown because I haven't heard it yet, and the whole spiel. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. Bryan, what are your thoughts? Tell me.
You know what? I'm actually really conflicted about this whole thing. One makes me think that, look, we've gotten to the point where with social media, we're throwing all these things out there, and we're actually adding fuel to the fire on social media, and they're hearing that, and we saw that with the Le'Veon Bell thing, and then it's getting worse and worse. But I keep on going back to the same thing that, I mean, this is not new, but it's just the fact that Juju Smith-Schuster won the team MVP award. We were talking last week about Ben Roethlisberger being snubbed, but the one who felt the biggest snub and possibly couldn't handle it was Antonio Brown, and he's throwing balls at his quarterback on that day. So it goes back to the fact that this guy is a petulant child, and he just can't handle it. And if you have to go ahead and side with one of them, you side with the fact that you just can't let the inmate run the asylum. And that's exactly what would happen in this situation. I hate to part with him. I don't think that you could win a Super Bowl without Antonio Brown, but the double-edged sword shows that they haven't won a Super Bowl with Antonio Brown. And this many egos really is tough to handle. Remember the big three with the Miami Heat when LeBron James went down there with Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade? And right away, those guys did not win a championship because there were so many egos. They ended up winning one, but that was a different situation. But it's the fact that there's not enough balls to go around when Antonio Brown's in there. And when Ben Roethlisberger feels he has to force the ball to him, he gets picked off. So, I don't want there to be subtraction, but this looks, smells, feels like a divorce. And I think that's what's going to happen. I can see a holdout. I can see all kinds of problems I'm going to give you a spoiler right now. May minicamp, don't expect them. So with that being said, hate to lose the talent, but when you have a headache, you go straight for the medicine cabinet and you take whatever you can to get rid of that headache. And I think at this point, that's who we have to look at as far as eliminating. And I hate to say it because I love the guy and I just got his Funko Pop. So there's $15 down the drain.
I think that, and I talked a lot about this last night for those that listen to the standard is a standard, but I think with Antonio Brown, they have a decision to make in early March before his signing bonus kicks in and guarantees him guaranteed money. I think if they're going to make a move, I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. Once the new league year starts and things of that nature. So I don't know. It doesn't look good right now, but I also know that when things are breaking down as it happens, it always looks a little bit worse than what it is. Mike Tomlin, he put on the face and he said all the right things, and I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent, but at the same time, I also realize that when they get him into a room, maybe things will be said that will iron themselves out. And like you said, Antonio Brown is a tremendous talent. The question I have, and I'll ask you this, is can things go back to the way they were at this point? I mean, he walked out on the team, and can he, or what would he have to do to kind of get his teammates' trust back? That's my concern.
He doesn't care about that. And at this point, I really don't, be honest with you, I really don't care about that because when it comes down to game day, that stuff goes out the window when they're on the field. As far as I'm concerned, you think that if Le'Veon Bell came back, do you think that DeCastro wouldn't block for him? I actually heard people say, like, well, those guys will let him get his butt kicked on a few plays and just not block for him. No, they're not going to do that. They're there for one reason, and it's a ring. So I think they could get past it on the field. Some of those guys don't talk to each other in the locker room anyways. I actually was listening to the radio and talking about their locker formations and how it was set up. And the reason that James Harrison and Antonio Brown are such good friends, their lockers were very close to each other. And they were tight, and now they've got a common bond. It's like two supervillains in a comic book, like when the Joker and the Penguin got together to try to defeat Batman, because even though they had nothing in common, they're like, hey, we hate the same guys, so we're together. We've got to be friends because we've got a common enemy. And that's kind of what's happening right now with Debo and AB. They've got a common enemy. But so one of the things they did with that locker formation, they took somebody like Joe Hayden and moved him over to be over there with Antonio Brown to be a positive force. And they took Juju and put him on the opposite side of the room. But with that being said, as far as being professionals and a common goal, they can definitely get past this. But it's the fact that guys like the Rappaports and any talking head, and you and I probably add fuel to the fire too, and they're listening to it. So that's the problem. They listen to what they want to listen to. But when it's time to pick up the phone, when you're being called and answer that phone, they don't do it. It's like that girl I dated in high school and college and I got in a fight with, and it's so frustrating. You're like, hey, we need to talk about this, and they're just completely blocking you. That's exactly what Antonio Brown is doing. This is more, instead of 412 area code, this is more Beverly Hills 91210 or whatever it is. That's what it feels like to me. I just feel like it's a child. I messed up that joke because I wasn't ready for it. Now I forget the zip code. But anyways, you know what I'm saying. They can get past it. It just depends whether he wants to. And here's the thing. Now we have learned through the Le'Veon Bell thing, you can sit out, give up some money, but get to your freedom. It's like in Shawshank Redemption when he's going through like 2 miles of the foulest sewer to get to freedom on the other side, they're willing to put aside a year of salary to get what they want. Now, I know he's in there for 3 years, but he's banking on the fact that if he pushes all the right buttons, they trade him.
Oh, he was hanging out with the perfect guy in terms of James Harrison if he wants to know how to get out of town. And it's Beverly Hills 90.
And it worked.
Beverly Hills 90210.
90.
By the way, 90210.
And I've seen like every episode.
I'm sure you have.
Team Dylan, not
exactly. The reason why I wanted to talk about Antonio Brown is because when you look at that, then this is the title of this podcast, our offseason team needs. Now, we're going to talk about this at length and more specifically by position in upcoming shows. But today I just want to kind of get a feel for where we both think, where is the most glaring need on this team? Well, I think before this week, like say last Sunday, last Thursday even, if we were to talk about this, no one would have ever thought that Antonio Brown could possibly not be in the mix starting next year. Here we are, though. And so if he's not on the team, well, wide receiver, that just got promoted on team needs. I understand you still have Juju Smith-Schuster, but my goodness, you're going to need someone else. So we're going to keep that into account. But now we're going to talk about off-season team needs, and this could be in a multitude of ways. This could be in the NFL draft, or this could be in free agency. So, Brian, before we talk about in which areas we would target them in terms of should it be a free agent signing or should it be a draft pick, what is your number one team need for the Steelers heading into 2019's offseason?
For me, it's cornerback. It's always going to be that secondary that has been the problem this year, and that's what needed fixed. And I'm not talking a late corner. I'm not talking a guy that is, when I say a late corner, the guy that's still around at the end of March that other teams have passed up. I'm talking about getting in the mix for a big name or a big upside guy that you have to outbid somebody for, not getting him. I mean, look, you have the cap room, don't go bargain basement. So I think a corner is a number one need in free agency, and it could be a number one need in the draft as well. And there's some really nice looking corners out there, like a DeAndre Baker, like a Julian Love, possibly from Notre Dame. There's other names out there too. Greedy Williams is another guy from actually, Greedy Williams is another guy that I would look at in a hurry. So the talent's there. You're picking at 20. You have a better shot at getting one of those guys as well. I think you need to shore that up. Also, inside linebacker is still a major need. This team has shown that they can
only pick one.
Okay. Well, if I'm the GM, I'm fixing the corner position first.
So you got corner as number one. I understand that. I totally get that.
I think that's the hardest need to fill, and I think that's the most glaring when it comes down to it. You can fake it with inside linebacker a lot more than you can fake it with corner.
Okay, I was going to go inside linebacker with my top need. I wasn't impressed with the run defense this year. I knew it wasn't horrible, but it also wasn't great. And Ryan Shazier covered up a lot of stuff. I understand that Ryan Shaziers don't grow on trees. I've said that before on podcasts before. And I know that this draft class isn't the best in regards to, inside linebacker position. But free agency, there might be able to find some pieces of the puzzle. Okay, so Brian, you would have inside linebacker at 2 then, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Hear me out here. I know cornerback's a need, and I definitely think that that's number 2, but I'm going to go ahead. We both agree. So you and I have 1 and 2 flipped. You have cornerback 1, inside linebacker 2. I have inside linebacker 1, cornerback 2. Hear me out here with my third. There's something that is telling me safety, and I'm not really sure why, because when you think about it, I was impressed with Sean Davis this year. I thought he had a good year, his first year of free safety, and maybe it's that I'm just not sold on Terrell Edmonds, or maybe it's that I'm not sold on Morgan Burnett in the role that he filled this year, because I always feel like the Steelers can have an extra safety if they have the right guy. They could always use a player that can play that heavy role, which was supposed to be Terrell Edmonds' role if Burnett didn't get hurt. but Burnett was a sub package guy. Not saying that should be a top priority in the draft, but I got to put safety in my top 3. Do you think I'm nuts, or do you think that's a legitimate thought there?
I think it is, but I actually have another position ahead of safety, because I am a Sean Davis guy. I definitely believe in him. If I'm looking at number 3, I'm looking offensive line because it's getting a little long in the tooth. You're not going to have Gilbert's all but gone, and the jury's out on Ramon Foster. And the reason, I have a feeling, I can almost guarantee in my gut that they're going to release him. They could bring him back at the minimum later in June or something like that. It doesn't mean we're going to see the end of him, but I definitely think on paper, we're going to see the end of him very early in the off season. And at that point, you're going to want to replace a unit that's getting long in the tooth because, that's not a young unit anymore. And remember one more thing. If these head coaching searches with Mike Munchak, if they heat up and he departs, that's a huge free agent loss, and you need to make sure that you're not going to get away with a project as much or a no-name as much as you would have with Munchak in town. So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. The thing is, when I think about the offensive line, I think about the depth that they have at each position. So for me, a lot of this depends on the health and the progress of Gerald Hawkins. And he was the former, I think, 4th-round pick out of LSU. He hurt himself this year in OTAs, I believe. He tore his quadriceps, was out for the year. If he's a guy they think could be a starting caliber tackle, and then you just took Chuks Okorafor last year, you have BJ Finney, who's likely to be back. You have Matt Filer still. I think that interior offensive line would be where I would target. Do you agree with that, or are you still thinking tackle?
I'm actually thinking more guard.
Okay.
Because of the Ramon Foster situation, I would probably think that they might. You have the tackles that you just named: Filer, Okorafor, Hawkins. Possibly coming back in there. I would actually think guard, or maybe that hybrid, that guard tackle, where
Yeah.
you just you have the kind of guy that you could throw anywhere, and we've seen guys like that with the Steelers. A lot. Chris Hubbard was more recent, a guy that we could talk about there. So I just that's one area that I think we take for granted. But that whole thing could come tumbling down just like that, with another injury and the departure of your genius coach.
Okay, so what's your 4th then? If you have O-line as your 3rd, what is your 4th team need?
Yeah, because I'm with you on inside linebacker. It still needs taken care of. But I go back to my original claim: how important corner is. Look, Joe Hayden's not there forever. You might get one more season out of him. You might get a 3rd on that contract. I think it might be tough to get a 4th. Artie Burns is definitely not a solution. And Mike Hilton, as good as he is in the slot, he's not an outside shutdown corner. So he's a piece of the puzzle and he's very important. But I think you need 2 guys to come in and compete. Maybe one rookie to learn, and maybe a free agent. And I know I didn't mention Cody Sensabaugh, but I think he is a fill-in piece, and he is more of a reserve on that team that ended up being pressed into a starting role at the end. He did well, but definitely they're still suspect.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with my next team need. I'm actually gonna go with running back. It's not that I don't love James Conner. It's not that I wasn't impressed with Jalen Samuels. I just think that the Steelers would be very wise to add a 3rd back. I don't think Stephen Ridley's coming back. I don't think Le'Veon Bell's coming back. I don't think Fitzgerald Toussaint's coming back. So they're going to have to find someone. I'm thinking maybe if you look at Connor's running style, he's a downhiller. He's got good moves, good burst. Durability has been a question throughout his career. Jalen Samuels, not as fast, very good in the open field, has good hands, lacks the explosion, but still is a good solid back from what we saw in 2018. I'd like to have a guy that's kind of a good mixture of both. It might be a mid to late round draft pick. I'm not interested in too many free agent running backs. I feel like the wear on those tires can be a little much for me. But I think that they do need to address some offensive positions, especially in the draft. And I would put running back right up there at number 4 for me, at least right now. And let's assume that Antonio Brown is still with the Steelers for the sake of argument here, because I think we both agree that if he leaves, wide receiver might be number 1. Would you agree?
Well, we saw Martavis Bryant leave on draft day last year, and all of a sudden, your number 2 pick is a wide receiver, and nobody really saw that coming. We, figured a wide receiver was going to be drafted somewhere down the line, but not that high, and that's exactly what they did. So if AB's not there, that's a glaring. That does change everything. So that could very well be your number 2 option. But you got to think about this though too, Jeff. If he's not there, it's because he's traded, and you have another first round draft pick this year.
Yeah.
Now, the last time they had 2 first round draft picks did not work out well at all, and that was 1989. That's the Tim Worley, Tom Ricketts draft. It worked out terribly for that team, but I think this is a much better scouting situation all these years later. 30 years later, I can see them have 2 draft picks in the first round. And then at this point, you have lots of options. So you could go corner and wide receiver at number 1. So that's something that we might even be looking at too.
That's true. I would expect also a player to maybe come back. If they're going to trade Antonio Brown, maybe not just get picks, but actually get a proven commodity at the same time. So we'll see. What's your final team need there, Brian? Do you have any more?
You know what? All of these are, I see what you're saying about the running back. I don't want to, I get it. I see what you're saying about the safety. I get that too. I don't want to be redundant. So you're going to shake your head at me because you always do this when I do it. I think you need an upgraded kicker.
Well, okay. All right.
That's got to be addressed. And if you just bring somebody in as a free agent, those guys fly around all the time. You can get somebody decent. I know you spent the money on Chris Boswell, but if it doesn't work, you say, all right, I lost on that one. Admit that you made a mistake and it didn't work. I'll tell you, if I bought a shirt or I bought something that doesn't work like I thought it was going to, it's in the closet or it's in the yard sale or I'm giving it to somebody, or it's on eBay. I'm not going to keep using something hoping it gets better just so I don't admit that I'm wrong. So at that point, if you make a mistake on something, get rid of it.
Yeah. I'm going to go with a tight end as my final team need because Jesse James is going to hit free agency. And I know no one's going to pay top dollar for him. But if they don't bring him back, they are really thin at that position. We're talking Xavier Grimble could be back. Vance McDonald, I think, has 1 more year left on his deal. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to check on that. They just don't have a lot of depth there. Another position is wide receiver, even if Antonio Brown is coming back, because Eli Rogers is a player that is going to be a free agent after this season or now in the offseason. Ryan Switzer, who played well, is not necessarily the guy. James Washington had growing pains. We know what Juju brings to the table, but adding to that stable of receivers is never a bad idea, in my opinion. And then let's not also forget edge pass rusher. That should be up there as well. Bud Dupree, they might take away his fifth-year option. I doubt they do, but still, you only have Anthony Chickillo and you have Ola Adeniyi, and they did sign back Keon Adams as well. These are guys that, if you find a free agent that can rush the passer, you pull the trigger, get after the quarterback even more than you already do, complement TJ Watt on the other side. So I think that it's safe to say that we could all somehow, some way find a way to navigate our way through Steelers team needs. But I don't think there's many positions where I say, yeah, I don't think they need help there. The few that I would be defensive line. I think they're solid. You can look for some depth players like Tyson Alualu, possibly. Quarterback, I think they're fine there as well. That's it. Can you think of anything else, Brian? A position where they don't need help?
Actually, no, you know what? I'm kind of thinking that tight end is not a glaring need right now. I did not realize this until you brought it up, but I just looked up Vance McDonald's contract. Do you realize he's not a free agent until 2022?
Really? I didn't know that.
They restructured him last August.
Oh, okay.
Which I wasn't aware of, but he's around because now I'd like you to go back a few months when you chastised me for buying the Vance McDonald jersey because he wasn't going to be around, and you harshed my buzz when I was so excited about getting that 89. So yeah, he's actually going to be around. I know he gets injured. I thought he had a healthier season this year.
Yep.
I don't think anybody's complaining about him. I think Jesse James could come back very cheap. And by the way, Jesse James with a Kardashian comment has become one of my favorite players just for that. I thought that was absolutely fantastic. You know what? Wide receiver, I agree with you too. I think if we're looking ahead and we're previewing 2019, I think Ryan Switzer gets a bigger role. I don't see a guy like Eli Rogers coming back. I think they are actually going to go in that 6'3" range, try to get a big man at wide receiver and a field spreader like they had with a sober Martavis Bryant, which wasn't very often at all. But I think they'd like to get somebody like that as well. I see what you're saying on edge. I mean, you could always fix something, but I was not really down on this team on Sunday night as much when I thought Antonio Brown was just was injured. When ignorance is bliss. I had no clue that this stuff was happening. And now if we're previewing next season, I'm thinking about an offensive line getting older. I'm thinking of the possibility of losing some guys here and there. And I'm thinking, gosh, we always talk about the window, Jeff, and that window closing because of Ben Roethlisberger. Well, the window's closing in other places, so they have to go ahead and clean it up. Running backs, you can find a good free agent running back to come in as your replacement, your third down back. I don't think they're looking for anybody to replace James Conner as right now. And I think they actually like Jalen Samuels, and what they were doing in that game when they had them both on the field at the same time and they platooned them more was not a disaster. They got a lot of receiving yards out of both of those guys. They got over 100 receiving yards, and they had a pretty good game with not a lot of carries at the running back position. So you can't fix everything, but I think it's those glaring needs that we've talked about for the last couple of years: corner, inside linebacker, quite possibly wide receiver is what we're looking at, and the offensive line.
Yes, and so as the offseason continues to drag on at this point for the Steelers, we will be back obviously every week to talk about one position in particular. We're going to break down the depth chart. We're going to talk about maybe some news that breaks. They could sign someone. They could re-sign someone. They're already starting to do some of that stuff with the reserve contracts and things of that nature. Their offseason 90-man offseason roster is starting to get filled out. So we'll be talking about that as we go throughout this. Now, we do have some big games coming up, and that's the wild card weekend. This is one of my favorite weekends in the NFL. Although the divisional round is my absolute favorite. I love Wild Card Weekend because it's when you get those crazy 6 seeds in there, and you never know when they can make some noise, a la the 2005 Steelers. So, Brian, you have the spreads there for us. Let's do some picks. Let's pick some games. Let's pick some winners. Go ahead, read off the game. Tell me what the point spread is. I'll tell you who I think is going to win straight up and against the spread.
Okay, so the very first game that we're looking at this weekend will be the very hot Indianapolis Colts, a team that started off 1-5 against the Houston Texans. The point spread right now with the home team is only 1.5. So it's the Texans minus 1.5 against a hot offensive team in the Colts.
Do you know off the top of your head what their regular season record was facing one another in the AFC South?
I'm sorry, Jeff. I had a problem with that. What was that?
I said, do you know what their record was against one another in the AFC South? They played twice, obviously.
Once again, I think I'm having problems on my end hearing you. I do apologize.
No, we'll figure it out. So for those that can hear us, let's talk about this spread. 1.5 points. That's a sucker's bet, in my opinion. But I'm going to take the points, and I'm going to take the Colts. So, Brian, can you hear me yet? You're still on mute there, Brian. You muted yourself.
You're taking the Colts, Jeff. I like that. I really down the stretch, I didn't think the Texans looked as exciting as they did during that big winning streak. So I'm going with a hot hand. I'm going with the redemption year of Andrew Luck. And I'm looking at the magic of Mike Mitchell on that defense. I can't even do that with a straight face. But I'm looking at the Colts to go on the road against a division foe that they have beaten before and go ahead and win that game.
Okay, yeah, like I said, I'll take the Colts straight up, and I'll take them getting points. What's the next game on the docket?
So we have the Seattle Seahawks, which very strange team. They don't have the defense that they used to. Going to Dallas and playing the Cowboys, who, for me, a team that backed into the division with all of the injury problems in Washington and just the crazy year with the Philadelphia Eagles. So this is two teams that these might be the two worst teams in the playoffs going against each other at this 4-5 spot. So it is -2. The Cowboys are favored. And for a home team, that's basically, you're at pick'em land.
Yeah.
At that point.
-2, huh? Well, I like Seattle's running game. That's how they move the football, and Russell Wilson rarely makes mistakes. I think that I just feel like both of these teams are coming into the playoffs on different levels. I feel like the Seattle Seahawks are playing better. The Dallas Cowboys were just kind of treading water when they reached the playoffs. They had kind of peaked at that crescendo earlier when they beat the Saints, and then they've kind of slowly come down to earth afterwards. This might surprise me. I'm going to take the Seahawks getting the points and straight up. So that's 2 straight road victors that I'm predicting in this wild card weekend. I have the Colts going on the road. Or did you say that you did say the Dallas Cowboys are giving points, right?
Yes, the Cowboys are favored at home by 2.
Yeah, I'll take the road dogs both straight up and against the spread in both games on Saturday. What do you think?
Well, I think you're messing so much with Texas right now. You're messing with Texas, Jeff. I'm looking at the Cowboys. When it comes down to it, I think Zeke Elliott is going to control this game. I don't really see them getting much farther than winning this game. It'll be a fun game to watch because, like I said, they're not the 2 best teams in the playoffs. In fact, I think they're the 2 worst, like I mentioned before. But I'm interested in this matchup, and I just think Dallas. And it pains me to pick Dallas in any era, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. Dallas Cowboys. I can't go against Texas twice.
Okay. So what about Sunday? I know that's the game I'm looking forward to.
So the next game is the one that you're definitely looking forward to. I think
Yep.
everybody is.
Yep.
And that is the Los Angeles Chargers against the Baltimore Ravens. And I got a message from the Ravens today. There's actually tickets available for this game. Believe it or not. And that you and I being Marylanders right now, we that's just the one difference that we always talk about Steeler fans and Raven fans. And yes, I mean, you could very easily call the Baltimore Raven ticket office and go ahead and get tickets for this game. It is a 2.5 point spread, and the Ravens are favored in this as the home team. So leads me to believe once again that this is a pick 'em game when you typically give 2.5 to 3 to the home team.
Okay, so who do you have?
Who do I have? I have the Baltimore Ravens winning this game. They, for some reason, they're like the fungus that doesn't go away. They're like, just when you think that you're over that stomach flu, and next thing you know, your pants are below your ankles and you're running for your life. That's what the Ravens remind me of. They just keep coming back, and not in a good way, like in Rocky when his manager, when Apollo Creed's manager kept on saying the man keeps coming back. Now this is a bad way. This is just like a demon that you just can't exorcise. And for some reason, the Ravens aren't going away. And I don't know if the rest of the country feels this way, but I know I feel this way. I want them to lose so much that they're just going to win for that reason.
Okay, so for me, this is all about 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. It might have been a little bit longer when these two teams played in Los Angeles. And
yeah, it was 2 weeks.
I don't think that Phillip Rivers and the Chargers are going to play that bad again. I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure if Melvin Gordon was in that game. If he wasn't, I don't think he was 100%. He was just coming off his injury. You're nodding like he was in the game, so I'm assuming that's what you mean.
Yes, he was just. It was his first game back.
Okay, so for me, I like the Chargers, even if they have to go across country. They've done it before. They did it in Pittsburgh this year, and they've seen Lamar Jackson now. Everyone's got tape on Lamar Jackson, but they've seen it, and they know what to expect. They're not going to be surprised. I think that's one of the things that the Ravens have that a lot of teams don't, and that's even this late in the season, they have an element of surprise. You just don't know what you're going to get. And so with that said, I actually am, I picked the Ravens to win in LA. I was one of the few people that did on our shows and our podcasts and stuff. I'm going to take the Chargers here, though. I think they're the more veteran team. I think they're the more talented team. And the Ravens don't scare me at M&T Bank as much anymore. The Steelers went in and won there this year. The Browns almost, well, some might say should have won there in week 17. Heck, even the Buccaneers gave them a game in there. And so I don't fear that home field advantage as much anymore. I'm going to take another road team to go into Baltimore and win. I'll take the Chargers straight up and against the spread.
I completely disagree with you on this. I would actually guarantee. I'll give you my Vance McDonald jersey if I'm wrong. But I really think that the Ravens are. Okay, yeah, I'm not telling that. Let's the whole family can fit in my Vance McDonald. Well, then you could have the Antonio Brown Pop Funko that I just got. So no, I really think that this is hell's team right now, the Baltimore Ravens, and they'll go to that cesspool in Baltimore. They'll host this team and they'll win. And one of the other things that has not been discussed, for some reason, why they're making this the 1 o'clock game when then this should be, of all games, this should be the 4:25 game, and it's not. And it actually ticks me off because Pittsburgh had to play them at night when they were rested. The Ravens it seems like the Ravens get the calls. Here, I'm complaining. I'm being that whiny guy, but the Ravens get that other break. The Ravens get breaks, and I don't know why. And this is another break that they got. When you look at a logical decision here, and the logical choice should have been Los Angeles plays the late game, because why does Philly and Chicago have to be the late game? There's no reason for it.
Yeah, you're right. No, I didn't think about that. No one's talking about that. That's something Mad Dog Russo would talk about. I'll have to call in a show tomorrow and bring that up. So let's go to the last game, the cap off the wild card weekend NFC matchup 425. What's that?
It is the Philadelphia Eagles with, I think, you at quarterback, Jeff, against the Chicago Bears in Chicago. Mitch Trubisky getting his playoff debut, and they are favored by 6. This is a very interesting ball game.
Yeah. It's in Chicago, obviously division winner. The Eagles have, I think, bartenders in Philadelphia playing cornerback. Nick Foles is a little banged up. You say the Bears are giving 6?
Yeah.
All right, here we
It's a
go.
lot.
Let's put some chalk on the board. I'm going to take the Bears to win straight up, but I'll take the Eagles getting the points. I think it's going to be a close game. I think that the Bears will win the game. I think that a player like Tariq Cohen is going to be very tough for that Eagles defense, even though they're playing better. And Mitchell Trubisky's athleticism. People forget that this guy, he's kind of like that Josh Allen type. You wouldn't think he's a runner, but he can run. I think he's going to make some plays outside the pocket. I think the Bears win. Like I said, take them straight up, but I'll take the Eagles getting 6. What about you?
You know what? I actually think this is more of an upset than any other picks, any of other road teams. This is a possible upset. This game actually intrigues me. You bring up a great point with Cohen and Trubisky, and don't forget about that defense with Khalil Mack.
Yeah.
That is huge. And to look what they did against contenders this year, especially the Rams, they kept on beating good teams. I'm kind of compelled to think that Alshon Jeffrey for the Eagles could do something, but I think that team is way too banged up, even though they always seem to have a little bit of magic there. I'm just thinking that this is Chicago's game. Chicago very easily, a couple more weeks added onto the season, they could have been the number 2 seed. That's how well they played at the end. I believe in this team. I don't think it's going to be as I think it's going to be close. So, if you're getting those 6 points and you're the Eagles, go ahead and take them. But, straight up where it counts, it's Chicago.
Okay, so you're taking same as me. You're taking the Bears, but not to cover, correct?
Yep.
All right, that's going to be interesting. I love Wild Card Weekend. It's going to make for some really interesting matchups. Who's going to be traveling to New England? Who's going to be going to Kansas City? It all depends on this Sunday. But I know you want to talk about something else, Brian, before we wrap up this show, and that was the coaching search. There's a lot of vacancies out there, and you wanted to talk about, well, we all want to talk about one potential head coach in Mike Munchak, but other people that are rumored to be searching or possible candidates for those jobs. Brian, go ahead and talk about that for a little bit.
Right now, we have 8 openings, and that includes the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals. So the AFC North, that's where it's most important for Steeler fans. But it's also important if you're looking at something like the Green Bay Packers and the Denver Broncos, who are looking at interviewing Mike Munchak. In fact, Munchak is going to be in Denver tomorrow, and he's also been given permission to go ahead to Green Bay. Now, I kind of think that the hot coaching pick out of New England, the guy who spurred the Colts last year, I think he's really going to be the guy in Green Bay, but I can see the Broncos making a play for a guy like Mike Munchak. The other guys the Broncos are looking at, though, Vic Fangio, who is going to be he's actually going to be playing this weekend. So I don't know. I mean, coaching this weekend for the Bears, their defensive coordinator. He's a hot pick out there too. So they might wait to talk to him. And another guy who is not coaching this weekend but coaching next week is Zach Taylor. He's a Rams assistant. In fact, he's their quarterback coach, and I don't believe he's in the family line of Zachary Taylor. Our 12th president that couldn't eat cherries. But as nice little history, little dig in there. But he's somebody that is being looked at. The team that confuses me the most, there's two of them actually. The Cardinals bringing in a guy like Cliff Kingsbury. They're also looking at Zach Taylor. I don't know what they're doing down there. The Bengals. So the Bengals are looking at two castoffs right now, and it's Hugh Jackson and Vance Joseph. And I really think we've seen a lot of Hugh Jackson. I watched Hard Knocks this year. I wasn't impressed with Hugh. He seems like a nice enough guy, but looks like the Bengals want to go ahead and hang their hat with him, who was their offensive coordinator just a few years ago. And they're also looking at another guy that just got fired in Vance Joseph, who I have a friend who is a huge Broncos fan, and he was calling for his head in week 2 of this season. I watched a lot of Broncos games this year, and I was just not impressed with him whatsoever. The Bengals are also going to take a look at Zach Taylor, who is, he comes from Sean McVay's team, and he's in the mold. He's like a young 35-year-old guy. He's been coaching since he was in his 20s, so they might look his way. The most interesting one for me, Jeff, is the Cleveland Browns. So not very often are you going to look at a team that ended up 7-8-1 and crown them as having a great season. But when you cut it in half and you say this team was 5-3 over their last 8 games with Greg Williams as their head coach, you could go ahead and say that that was a successful season, especially with their last 2 years. Don't know if they're going to go in that direction with Greg Williams. In fact, there's a part of me that's hoping that they don't stick with Greg Williams and that he's available and a job in the Steel City opens up and Greg Williams becomes the defensive coordinator. I think that would be perfect. And I've been calling for that for the last 4 or 5 weeks. But the guy that they're really looking at, there was 2 guys that Dorsey, the general manager, was looking at. And the one was Mike McCarthy. He has ties because of Green Bay. And he seems to be the front runner in Cleveland. They're looking at their offensive coordinator, Freddie Kitchens as well. But I really think that it's going to be Mike McCarthy. The other guy that they had their eye on was Lincoln Riley from the University of Oklahoma, but he signed an extension with them, and he is not going to the pros for at least the next couple of years, but he's going to be the college guy that we're going to be talking about for the next few years for a head coaching job, but it's not going to be with the Browns. There are other very interesting openings, but for me, those are the big ones, Jeff.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things kind of pan out, especially within the AFC North with there's not usually a lot of turnover outside of Cleveland, yet there's even talk that John Harbaugh could get some options. I know that Miami's interested in trying to lure him away and bring him down there. It's going to be crazy, and it'll be fun to watch.
Tampa as well has talked about a trade.
Tampa's also interested in the head coach from Notre Dame, Brian Kelly. There's some mixed reactions on that. So not really sure what they're looking at there. Tampa's another strange situation. They're also looking at a guy that I like a lot. Actually, 2 guys I like a lot. George Edwards, who's the defensive coordinator in Minnesota, and he's pretty tough. They've had a pretty good defense the last few years. He's a guy that could possibly go to the Buccaneers. And another guy, Eric Bieniemy,
If you remember him from 30 years ago with the Colorado Buffaloes, he is the offensive coordinator in Kansas City. We saw the success that they had this year on offense. I mean, a lot of that could be contributed to the fact that you have an offensive head coach in Andy Reid, and you just have a superstar in Pat Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce, those kind of guys. But they're going to be looking at the Buccaneers job as well. No one knows what's going on with the Jets. The Jets might be looking at McCarthy. They might be trying to look at Josh McDaniels, which I actually, like I mentioned before, I think McDaniels is going to the Packers. But with 8, think about it. You've got 8 openings. That is 1/4 of the entire league that are going to have new coaches next year. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how everything shakes out. And then you have guys that will be looking for coordinator positions, and actually some guys that will be looking to go to college as well. So the hot stove is getting ready to heat up big time. And I'm not completely convinced that Pittsburgh is not going to be looking for a coach. No, not a head coach, but I think they are going to be looking for another coordinator. And one of these guys that doesn't get a job might be in line to go ahead and get a job in Pittsburgh. And once again, my hope is Greg Williams.
Well, we'll see how that pans out. It'll be interesting to say the least. I know that we'll be here every week. So now that we had this first off-season edition of the Steelers preview, hopefully you, as listeners, can kind of gauge what to expect from this show. I didn't want to talk about Antonio Brown too much. I don't think we did. We talked a lot about the Steelers off-season needs. So if you're just joining us live on YouTube, you can go back and check it out from the beginning of the show. That's where all the good stuff is. And then we go into our picks and stuff of that nature. So with that said, Bryan, thank you for your time. If you're listening to us on audio, check us out on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search BTSC Steelers Radio. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, go to our audio platforms as well. Make sure you check us out on iTunes, Art19, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, all those places. Type in Steelers. We should be one of the top options for you there. And we thank you all for your support. We will be back every week for the Steelers preview. We're not going anywhere, folks. So enjoy it. Bryan, again, thanks as always. We'll see you next week on another episode of the Steelers preview.
Thank you.